She watched her daughter's life slip away, breath by breath. Just 3 months ago, she'd been a healthy athlete. Now she could barely lift her head from the hospital bed. When a mysterious stranger offered answers that medicine could not, she would discover that some truths come at an impossible price. Helena watched her daughter's life slip away one breath at a time, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do to stop it. 17-year-old Sarah lay motionless on the hospital bed, her once vibrant auburn hair now dull and brittle against the stark white pillow. The machines around her beeped with mechanical precision, each sound a reminder of how helpless Helena felt. 3 months ago, Sarah had been captain of the school's track team, her laughter echoing through their small mountain home like music. Now, she barely had the strength to lift her head. The tests came back inconclusive again, Mrs. Crawford, Dr. Martinez said softly, his weathered face etched with the kind of defeat that came from too many battles lost to mysterious illnesses. Her white blood cell count is erratic. Her temperature fluctuates without reason, and the sensitivity to light. He trailed off, shaking his head. I've never seen anything quite like this. Helena's hands trembled as she smoothed Sarah's hair back from her forehead. Her daughter's skin felt like paper, thin and fragile, as if she might crumble at the slightest touch. There has to be something else we can try. Another specialist, another test, anything. The doctor's silence stretched between them like a chasm. Helena had heard that silence before, in other hospitals, from other doctors. It was the sound of giving up, and she refused to accept it. I'll need to discuss payment plans for the extended care, Dr. Martinez finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The insurance company has flagged the account for review. Without a definitive diagnosis, I'll find the money. The words came out sharper than Helena intended, her desperation bleeding through her carefully maintained composure. She had already sold everything of value, worked double shifts at the diner, and borrowed against her future. But she would find more. She had to. After the doctor left, Helena sank into the uncomfortable hospital chair that had become her second home. The financial burden crushed down on her like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. She had always prided herself on her independence, on being the mother who could handle anything life threw at her. Single parenthood had taught her to be resourceful, to find solutions where others saw only problems. But this was different. This was watching her child fade away while she stood powerless, armed with nothing but determination and an empty bank account. "Mom!" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through Helena's despair like a lifeline. "I'm here, baby." Helena leaned forward, taking her daughter's cold hand in both of hers. "How are you feeling?" Weird dreams again. Sarah's eyes, once bright green like summer leaves, now seemed almost grey in the harsh hospital lighting. "About wolves running through the forest. And there's this man. He keeps calling my name." Helena's blood ran cold. Sarah had been having these dreams for weeks, always the same elements. Wolves, forests, and a mysterious figure who felt familiar yet terrifying. The doctors dismissed them as fever-induced hallucinations, but something about the vivid detail in Sarah's descriptions made Helena's skin crawl. "It's just your mind processing the medication, sweetheart. Try to rest." But even as she spoke the words, Helena couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. Her own dreams had become increasingly vivid lately, filled with shadows that moved wrong and sounds that didn't belong to the waking world. She had always possessed what her grandmother called the sight, an intuition that had guided her through life's challenges. Now, that same intuition screamed that they were walking towards something dangerous, something that defied rational explanation. The next morning brought a new crisis. Helena arrived at the hospital to find Sarah's condition had worsened overnight. Her temperature had spiked to dangerous levels, and she was experiencing muscle spasms that the medical staff couldn't explain. "We need to transfer her to the regional medical center," Dr. Martinez explained urgently. "They have better equipment for cases like this." "Cases like what?" Helena demanded. You still don't know what's wrong with her? No, but they might have specialists who... How much will it cost? The number he quoted made Helena's knees buckle. It might as well have been $1 million. She had nothing left to sell, no one left to ask for help. Her parents were gone. Sarah's father had disappeared before she was even born, and Helena had always been too proud to maintain the kind of friendships that came with financial obligations. She excused herself to the hospital chapel, a small, dim room that smelled of old incense and desperate prayers. Helena wasn't particularly religious, but desperation had a way of making believers out of skeptics. She knelt on the worn carpet and closed her eyes, searching for some divine intervention, some miracle that would save her daughter. Difficult times require difficult choices. The voice came from behind her, rich and deep, with an accent she couldn't place. Helena spun around to find a man standing in the doorway, and her breath caught in her throat. He was tall, with dark hair that seemed to absorb the chapel's dim light, and eyes that held depths she didn't want to explore. Everything about him radiated power and danger, from the expensive cut of his charcoal suit to the way he moved with predatory grace. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in. Helena stood quickly, instinctively putting distance between them. Her grandmother's warnings about strange men who appeared in times of crisis echoed in her memory. My name is Darius Kane. He stepped into the chapel, and somehow the small space seemed to shrink around his presence. I understand your daughter is very ill. Helena's protective instincts flared. Are you a doctor? Not in the traditional sense. His smile was both reassuring and unsettling. But I might be able to help where traditional medicine has failed. I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but your daughter dreams of wolves. The statement stopped Helena cold. She sees a man in the forest who calls her name. She's losing weight despite eating normally. Her reflexes have become unnaturally sharp during nighttime hours, and she experiences severe photosensitivity. Helena's heart pounded against her ribs. How could you possibly know that? Because I've seen this condition before. Darius moved closer, and Helena caught a scent that reminded her of pine forests and winter nights. The medical establishment doesn't recognize it because they're looking in the wrong places, using the wrong framework to understand what's happening to your daughter. What are you talking about? Your daughter is going through a transformation, Helena. Her body is trying to become something it was always meant to be, but the process is happening too quickly, without proper guidance. His voice dropped to an almost hypnotic cadence. Without help, she won't survive it. Helena wanted to run, to dismiss this stranger's impossible words as the ravings of a madman. But something in his eyes held her frozen, something that spoke to the part of her that had always known there were mysteries in the world that science couldn't explain. You're insane. Am I? Or am I the first person to offer you real answers instead of empty condolences? Darius reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, extending it toward her. I can save your daughter's life, but I need you to trust me. Helena stared at the card without taking it. What would you want in return? Nothing you're not willing to give. His answer was maddeningly vague. Think about it, Helena. What do you have to lose at this point? Everything, she thought. But as she looked into his dark eyes, she realized she might have already lost everything that mattered. Sarah was dying, the doctors were out of options, and Helena was out of money. What did she have left to lose except her pride? If you're some kind of predator, I'm not interested in hurting you or your daughter. The sincerity in his voice was almost convincing. I'm offering you a chance to save her life. The choice is yours. Helena took the card with shaking hands. It was simple, elegant, with just his name and a phone number embossed in silver lettering. What kind of help are you talking about? The kind that works. Darius turned toward the door, then paused. Your daughter doesn't have much time left. The transformation will either complete successfully or it will kill her. There's no middle ground. After he left, Helena sat alone in the chapel for nearly an hour, turning the business card over in her hands. Everything rational in her mind screamed that this was madness, that desperate people were easy prey for con artists who promised miracles. But the rational part of her mind had been failing her for months now, unable to explain her daughter's condition or the dreams that plagued them both. She returned to Sarah's room to find her daughter awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression of quiet terror. "Mom, something's wrong with me." Sarah's voice was stronger than it had been in weeks, but her words sent ice through Helena's veins. "I can hear conversations happening 3 rooms away. I can smell what the cafeteria is serving for dinner, even though it's 2 floors down. And last night..." She hesitated, then continued in a whisper. "Last night I bent the metal rail on this bed without even trying." Helena sank into the chair beside the bed, Darius Kane's business card burning in her pocket like a guilty secret. "The doctors say you're getting better. The doctors are lying." Sarah turned to look at her mother, and Helena gasped. In the afternoon light streaming through the window, her daughter's eyes showed flecks of gold that hadn't been there before. "I can smell their fear every time they examine me. They don't know what I'm becoming." The word "becoming" hung in the air like a living thing, full of possibilities that Helena didn't want to acknowledge. She had always known Sarah was special, had always felt that her daughter was destined for something extraordinary, but this felt less like destiny and more like a curse. "There might be someone who can help us," Helena heard herself saying before she could stop the words. "Someone who understands what's happening to you." Sarah's enhanced hearing must have caught something in Helena's tone, because her eyes sharpened with new focus. "Who? I don't know yet." Helena pulled out the business card, staring at the embossed lettering. "But I think we're about to find out." That evening, after the nurses completed their rounds and the hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm, Helena stepped outside to make the call. Her hands shook as she dialed the number, and she nearly hung up twice before someone answered. "Helena!" Darius's voice came through the phone as if he had been waiting for her call. "I was hoping to hear from you. My daughter, she's changing, getting stronger in some ways, but..." Helena struggled to find words for what she had witnessed. "How did you know this would happen?" "Because I've been watching your family for longer than you realize." His admission should have terrified her, but instead it felt like a piece of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "Your daughter carries a very rare bloodline, Helena, one that's been dormant for generations." "What kind of bloodline?" "The kind that connects her to something ancient and powerful. The kind that makes her valuable to people like me." There was a pause, then his voice became gentler. "I know this is overwhelming. Let me prove to you that I can help. Meet me tomorrow night at the old cemetery on Hillcrest Road. Bring Sarah with you. I'm not taking my sick daughter out of the hospital to meet a stranger in a cemetery. She's not sick, Helena. She's awakening. And if you want her to survive that awakening, you need to start trusting someone who understands what she's going through." Helena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her shoulders. "How do I know you're not dangerous?" "You don't. But you know that staying on the current path means watching her die. Sometimes the only way forward is through the darkness." After she hung up, Helena stood in the parking lot for a long time, watching the lights of the city twinkle in the valley below. The mountain town had always felt like a safe haven, a place where she could raise her daughter away from the complications of the larger world. Now it felt like a trap, holding secrets she was only beginning to understand. When she returned to Sarah's room, she found her daughter sitting up in bed, looking more alert than she had in weeks. "I heard your phone call," Sarah said quietly. "These new ears are still getting used to filtering out background noise." Helena's heart sank. "Sarah, I want to meet him." Her daughter's voice carried a strength that reminded Helena of the girl Sarah used to be before the illness began. "Whatever's happening to me, I need to understand it. And if he has answers, it could be dangerous." More dangerous than dying slowly in this hospital bed? Sarah's eyes met her mother's, and Helena saw not the frightened child she had been protecting, but a young woman ready to fight for her own survival. "I trust you, Mom. If you think he might be able to help, then let's find out." Helena nodded slowly, knowing that she was about to cross a line from which there might be no return. But as she looked at her daughter, seeing the spark of hope rekindling in those changing eyes, she realized that some lines were meant to be crossed. Some boundaries existed only to be shattered by love and desperation, working in terrible harmony. Tomorrow night, they would meet Darius Kane at the cemetery, and Helena's carefully ordered world would never be the same again. But tonight, for the first time in months, Sarah was truly awake, and that had to be enough. The cemetery looked different at night, transformed from a peaceful resting place into something that whispered of ancient secrets and forgotten magic. Helena helped Sarah out of the car, her daughter moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for someone who had been bedridden just days ago. The doctors had been furious when Helena signed the discharge papers against medical advice, but their fury paled in comparison to the terror of watching Sarah waste away in that sterile hospital room. "I can smell him," Sarah whispered, her voice carrying an odd resonance that made Helena's skin prickle. "He's here already, waiting by the old mausoleum." Helena's enhanced intuition, the gift her grandmother had called both blessing and curse, screamed warnings at her. Yet something deeper, something primal and desperate, urged her forward. The moonlight filtered through the ancient oak trees, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of the branches above. Darius emerged from the darkness as if he had been shaped by it, his presence commanding even in the hushed stillness of the graveyard. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater tonight, the expensive suit replaced by clothing that somehow made him seem more dangerous, more real. His eyes found Helena first, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch before shifting to Sarah with something that looked like recognition. "You came," he said, and Helena caught a note of relief in his voice that surprised her. "We need answers," Helena replied, positioning herself slightly in front of her daughter despite Sarah's newfound strength. "Starting with how you knew about her condition." "Because I've been tracking your family line for years." Darius's admission hung in the night air like a confession. "Your great-grandmother was named Lydia Crawford. She lived in these mountains until 1943, when she disappeared during a particularly harsh winter. The official records say she died in a blizzard, but the truth is more complicated." Helena's blood turned to ice. "How could you possibly know about my great-grandmother?" "Because she was the last of your line to successfully complete the transformation your daughter is now experiencing." Darius stepped closer, and Helena caught that scent again. Pine and winter, and something wild that made her pulse quicken. "She didn't die in that blizzard, Helena. She chose to join my pack." The word pack hit Helena like a physical blow. All the dreams, all the strange symptoms, all the impossible changes in Sarah suddenly clicked into a pattern too terrifying to accept. "You're talking about werewolves," Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm talking about a species that has lived alongside humanity for millennia, hidden in plain sight, dismissed as folklore and fantasy." Darius's eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight, and Helena realized it wasn't a trick of the light. "Your daughter carries the genetic markers of our kind, Helena. The transformation that's been slowly killing her isn't a disease. It's an awakening that should have been guided and nurtured, not suppressed by human medicine." Sarah stepped forward, her movement so fluid it seemed like flowing water. "The dreams I've been having, they're memories, aren't they? Not my memories, but something older. Genetic memory," Darius confirmed, his attention focusing on Sarah with something that looked like reverence. "Your bloodline carries the experiences of generations of our kind. As you awaken, those memories surface, The man calling your name in the dreams is your great-great-grandfather, Marcus. He was my predecessor as Alpha of this territory. Helena's world tilted sideways. This is insane. Werewolves don't exist. This is all some elaborate con game, and I'm falling for it because I'm desperate. Show her, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and powerful. If this is what I am, what I'm becoming, then I need to see it. We both do. Darius studied Sarah for a long moment, something passing between them that Helena couldn't interpret. Finally, he nodded. The transformation is easier under the full moon, but it's not required. He began pulling off his sweater, revealing a torso marked with scars that looked like they had been made by claws. What you're about to see will change everything, Helena. Once you know the truth, there's no going back to the comfortable lies you've told yourself about the world. We're already past the point of no return, Helena replied, though her voice shook with fear and anticipation. What happened next would be seared into Helena's memory forever. Darius closed his eyes and took a deep breath, and then his body began to change. It wasn't the Hollywood version of transformation, all screaming and tearing flesh. Instead, it was like watching a master sculptor reshape clay, bones flowing and muscles reforming with a grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. Within moments, a massive wolf stood where Darius had been. Its coat was midnight black, shot through with silver that seemed to capture moonbeams, but it was the eyes that convinced Helena this wasn't some elaborate trick. Those were Darius's eyes, intelligent and ancient and impossibly human, despite the predatory face that housed them. Sarah gasped, but it wasn't a sound of fear. It was wonder, recognition, homecoming. She knelt in the dew-wet grass and extended her hand toward the wolf. When he padded forward to sniff her fingers, Helena saw tears streaming down her daughter's face. "I know you," Sarah whispered. "In my dreams, in the genetic memories, you've been calling to me." The wolf nuzzled Sarah's palm, then lifted his head to look at Helena. In that moment, she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. He was evaluating her, measuring her worthiness to know his secrets, to be trusted with the truth about her daughter's heritage. Then the transformation reversed itself, Darius resuming human form with the same impossible fluidity. He pulled his sweater back on, watching Helena's face carefully. "Now you know," he said simply. Helena sank onto a nearby stone bench, her legs unable to support her any longer. "This can't be real. People don't just turn into wolves. It's not possible." "The world is full of impossible things, Helena. Most people never see them because they don't need to. You're seeing them now because your daughter's life depends on it." Darius sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Sarah's transformation has been progressing without guidance for months. Her body is trying to complete a process it doesn't fully understand. Without help, the stress will kill her. "What kind of help?" Helena's voice came out as a croak. "She needs to learn control. She needs to understand what she's becoming and how to manage the changes. Most importantly, she needs to complete her first full transformation under safe conditions, with experienced guides who can help her through it." Sarah had been listening to their conversation while staring up at the moon, but now she turned to face them. "There's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling us." Darius's expression grew grave. "Your bloodline is special, Sarah. Not all humans carry the genetic markers for transformation, and even fewer carry them as strongly as you do. In our world, that makes you valuable. It also makes you a target." "A target for what?" Helena demanded. "Other packs, rogue wolves who would use her power for their own ends, and worse things that exist in the shadows, things that hunt our kind." Darius's voice dropped to a growl. "There are reasons we've stayed hidden for so long, Helena. Not everyone in the supernatural world has humanity's best interests at heart." Helena felt the familiar surge of protective fury that had driven her through 17 years of single motherhood. If keeping her safe means staying away from all of this, then that's what we'll do. You can't run from what she is, Darius said gently. The transformation won't stop because you ignore it. It will continue, and without proper guidance, it will kill her. And if we trust you, what then? Then I teach her control. I introduce her to our pack, our community. She learns to manage her new abilities, and she discovers that she's not alone in the world. His voice softened. And you both gain the protection of a family that will defend you with their lives. Helena looked at Sarah, seeing her daughter truly for the first time in months. The sickly pallor was gone, replaced by a vitality that seemed to glow from within. Her eyes held depths that spoke of ancient wisdom and untapped power. This wasn't the fragile girl Helena had been trying to protect. This was something magnificent and fierce, something that had been struggling to emerge for months. "There's more you're not telling me," Helena said, her intuition picking up currents of emotion from Darius that ran deeper than mere concern for a pack member. Darius was quiet for so long that Helena thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words were careful, measured. "Our kind bonds differently than humans do. We mate for life, and those bonds are chosen by forces beyond our control. When I first caught your scent 3 months ago, when I realized what was happening to Sarah," he paused, then met Helena's eyes directly. "I recognized something in you that I've been searching for my entire adult life." Helena's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that fate has a sense of humor. I came here to help your daughter, but I found something I didn't expect to find." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I found my mate." The words hit Helena like lightning, illuminating corners of her psyche she hadn't examined in years. The instant attraction she had felt in the hospital chapel, the way his presence seemed to fill empty spaces in her soul, the dreams that had been growing more vivid and more focused on wolves and forests, and a man whose face she could never quite see clearly. "That's impossible," she whispered, but even as she said the words, she felt their falsehood. "Is it? Haven't you felt it too? The pull, the recognition, the sense that you've been waiting for something without knowing what?" Darius's voice was hypnotic, dangerous. "Your great-grandmother felt the same thing when she met Marcus. It's why she chose to join the pack, why she abandoned her human life to embrace something wilder and more honest." Helena stood abruptly, pacing to put distance between them. "I won't abandon my life. I won't abandon my daughter to follow some impossible attraction to a man I barely know." "I would never ask you to abandon Sarah," Darius said, rising to follow her. "I'm offering to protect both of you, to give you both a place where you can be safe and whole and accepted for what you are." "And what am I exactly?" Helena spun to face him, her emotions churning like a storm. "I'm human. I don't transform. I don't have supernatural abilities. I'm just a single mother who's in way over her head." "You carry the dormant genes," Darius said quietly. "Not as strongly as Sarah, but they're there. Your intuition, your ability to sense things others miss, your connection to the natural world. Those aren't just human traits, Helena. They're the whispers of something deeper." Before Helena could respond, Sarah's voice cut through their conversation like a blade. "Mom, we need to leave. Now!" Both adults turned to see Sarah standing rigid, her head tilted as if listening to sounds they couldn't hear. Her eyes had gone completely golden, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with energy. "What is it?" Darius demanded, his own posture shifting into something predatory and alert. "Something's coming through the trees," Sarah whispered. "Something that smells like death and hunger and hate." Her voice carried a certainty that made Helena's blood run cold. "It's been tracking us." Darius cursed under his breath, his body beginning to shift toward his wolf form. "Rogues! They must have caught our scent." He looked at Helena with desperate urgency. "We need to get you both to safety. My pack is 10 minutes away if we call them, but..." A howl split the night air, long and mournful and filled with malice. It was answered by another, then another, until the cemetery was surrounded by a chorus of inhuman voices. Helena grabbed Sarah's hand, feeling her daughter's skin burning with fever that spoke of impending transformation. "The car," Helena said, but even as she turned toward the parking lot, dark shapes began emerging from between the tombstones. Wolves, but wrong somehow, their forms twisted with hunger and madness, their eyes reflecting red instead of gold or silver. "Too late," Darius growled, his transformation accelerating. "Helena, stay behind me. Sarah, let the change come. Don't fight it." "I don't know how," Sarah cried, her body beginning to convulse as her genetics responded to the threat and the proximity of so many of her kind. "Yes, you do," Darius said, his voice already deepening as his vocal cords changed. "Trust your instincts, trust your blood, trust me." The lead rogue stepped into the moonlight, and Helena's scream died in her throat. It had once been human, or at least partly human. Now it was something caught between forms, neither fully wolf nor fully man, trapped in a permanent state of agonizing transformation. Its eyes burned with intelligence and hatred and desperate hunger. "The bloodline," it spoke, its voice a rasping growl that barely formed words. "Give us the girl, and we might let the human live." "Over my dead body," Darius snarled, his transformation complete. He was larger in wolf form than Helena had realized, his presence filling the space between the rogues and her daughter with lethal promise. "That can be arranged," the creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're outnumbered, Alpha. Your pack is too far away to help. Give us the girl, and this ends quickly." Helena felt Sarah's hand slip from hers as her daughter's transformation began in earnest. The process was violent and chaotic, nothing like Darius's controlled change. Sarah screamed as her bones reformed, her body fighting against itself as human and wolf nature's warred for dominance. "She's not ready," Helena whispered, watching her daughter writhe in agony. "She doesn't know how to control it." But even as she spoke, something shifted in the air around them. Power, ancient and primal, began to emanate from Sarah's changing form. The scent of pine and snow and wild places filled the cemetery, drowning out the stench of corruption that clung to the rogues. "Impossible," the lead rogue breathed, taking a step backward. "She's not just any bloodline. She's Marcus's descendant. She carries the Alpha strain." Helena didn't understand what that meant, but she could see its effect on their attackers. The rogues began to shift nervously, their confidence wavering as Sarah's transformation reached its crescendo. When the change completed, the wolf that stood where Sarah had been was magnificent. Her coat was silver white, shot through with threads of gold that seemed to capture and hold moonlight. She was smaller than Darius, but carried herself with an authority that spoke of generations of leadership flowing through her veins. The lead rogue snarled and lunged forward, but Sarah met his charge with a grace and power that defied her inexperience. They collided in a fury of fangs and claws, but it was quickly clear that despite her youth, Sarah possessed something her opponent lacked: the pure, focused will of someone fighting to protect everything she loved. The battle was brief and decisive. When it ended, the lead rogue lay motionless on the cemetery grass, and the others had melted back into the darkness like the cowards they were. Sarah padded back to where Helena stood, frozen in shock and awe. Up close, Helena could see intelligence and love shining in her daughter's golden eyes, confirming that this was still Sarah, still her baby, just in a form that revealed her true nature. Darius approached more cautiously, his posture respectful as he acknowledged the power Sarah had displayed. When he shifted back to human form, his expression was troubled. "We need to get you both somewhere safe," he said, pulling his clothes back on. "What happened here tonight will be reported to other packs. Word will spread that Marcus's bloodline has awakened, and that will bring attention we're not ready to handle." Helena knelt beside her daughter's wolf form, stroking the silver fur with wonder. Can she change back? With practice, yes. For now, it's probably safer if she stays in wolf form. Her instincts are stronger this way, and she'll be able to sense threats more easily. As if responding to their conversation, Sarah began to shift back to human form. The process was smoother this time, more controlled, as if having completed the change once had taught her body the proper pathways. Within moments, Helena's daughter stood before them, naked and shivering, but unmistakably more herself than she had been in months. Helena quickly wrapped Sarah in her jacket, marveling at how different her daughter looked. The gaunt fragility was gone, replaced by lean muscle and vibrant health. Her eyes held depths that spoke of ancient wisdom, and her posture carried the confidence of someone who had discovered their true strengths. "I understand now," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the natural world around them. The dreams, the changes, everything. "I know what I am." "What we are," Helena corrected, surprising herself with the words. But as she spoke them, she felt their truth settling into her bones. Whatever happened next, whatever choices lay ahead, they would face them as a family. And maybe, just maybe, that family was about to become something larger and stronger than she had ever imagined possible. Darius was watching her with an expression of hope and longing that made her heart race. "Helena, don't," she said quickly, holding up a hand to stop him. "Don't push. Tonight has been overwhelming. I need time to process all of this, to understand what it means for both of us." He nodded slowly, accepting her boundaries, even as disappointment flickered across his features. "My offer stands. Both of you are welcome in my pack, under my protection. But the choice has to be yours." As they walked back toward the car, Sarah moving between them with newfound confidence, Helena felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on her shoulders. But for the first time in months, she also felt something else: hope. Her daughter was alive and strong and magnificent. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were just beginning. 3 weeks later, Helena stood in the kitchen of Darius's mountain cabin, watching the sunrise paint the peaks in shades of gold and crimson. The transition to living with his pack had been easier than she'd expected, though she still felt like an outsider, looking into a world she was only beginning to understand. Sarah had adapted with the natural resilience of youth, throwing herself into learning pack dynamics and transformation control with an enthusiasm that both thrilled and terrified Helena. The cabin smelled of pine and coffee and something indefinably wild that she was starting to associate with home. It was a dangerous thought, one that implied a permanence she wasn't ready to accept. Yet every morning she found herself lingering at this window, watching Darius lead the younger pack members through their training routines in the clearing below. "You're thinking too hard again," Sarah's voice came from behind her, tinged with a knowing tone that had become more pronounced since her first transformation. "I can practically hear the gears grinding from here." Helena turned to find her daughter leaning against the doorframe, looking more alive and vibrant than she had in years. Sarah's hair had grown longer and thicker, catching the morning light like spun copper. Her eyes held flecks of gold that seemed to shift and dance depending on her mood. Most remarkably, she carried herself with a confidence that spoke of someone who had finally found where they belonged. "I'm worried about you," Helena admitted. "This life, this world, it's so different from what we planned." "What we planned was for me to die slowly in a hospital bed," Sarah said with the brutal honesty of teenagers everywhere. "This is better, Mom. I'm stronger here. I'm useful. I'm part of something important." Helena poured herself another cup of coffee, buying time to marshal her thoughts. "But what about college? What about the future you wanted? You can't just throw away your entire human life for what? For the chance to be what I actually am instead of pretending to be something I'm not?" Sarah moved to the window, watching the pack with an expression of belonging that made Helena's heart ache. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing something better." Before Helena could respond, raised voices from the clearing drew their attention. A massive black SUV had pulled into the clearing, and several wolves Helena didn't recognize were emerging from the forest. Darius's posture had shifted into something alert and dangerous, his pack forming protective positions around him. "Who are they?" Helena asked, but Sarah had already gone rigid, her newfound senses picking up information Helena couldn't access. "Another alpha," Sarah whispered, her voice carrying notes of instinctive submission and fear. "Old pack, ancient bloodline, and he's..." Her eyes widened with shock. "Mom, he smells like us, like our family." Helena's blood turned to ice as understanding crashed over her like an avalanche. She had always known there were gaps in her family history, missing pieces that her mother had refused to discuss. But she had never imagined anything like this. They watched through the window as a man emerged from the SUV, and Helena's world tilted sideways. He was tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes the same unusual shade of green as Helena's own. His presence commanded respect, even at a distance. And when he smiled at something Darius said, Helena felt an impossible recognition pierce through her chest. "That's him," she whispered, memories flooding back with painful clarity. "That's the man from my nightmares. The one who's been calling to me in dreams since I was a child." Sarah grabbed her mother's arm with supernatural strength. "What are you talking about?" "I used to have these dreams when I was young. A man in the forest calling my name, reaching out to me. My mother would get furious whenever I mentioned them. She said they were just bad dreams, that I should forget them." Helena's voice shook as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed began falling into place. "She made me promise to never go into the deep woods alone, never trust strangers who knew too much about our family." The kitchen door opened, and Darius entered with an expression Helena had never seen before. He looked shaken, uncertain, as if the foundations of his world had just shifted beneath his feet. "Helena, we need to talk," he said quietly. "There's someone here who claims to know you." Claims. Helena's intuition, always reliable, was screaming warnings at her. Either he knows me or he doesn't. It's complicated. Darius moved to the window, his eyes tracking the stranger's movements with predatory focus. "His name is Marcus Kane. He says he's my uncle, though I've never heard of him before today. And he says..." Darius paused as if the words were difficult to speak. "He says he's your brother." The coffee cup slipped from Helena's nerveless fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. "That's impossible. I don't have a brother. My mother never..." But even as she spoke the words, memories were surfacing, whispered arguments between her parents late at night, her mother's inexplicable hatred of camping trips or hiking in the deep woods, the way she would go pale whenever anyone mentioned the old stories about the mountain folk who lived beyond the tree line. "He wants to see you," Darius continued, his voice carefully neutral. "Both of you. He says it's time you learned the truth about your family." Helena looked at Sarah, seeing her own confusion and fear reflected in her daughter's golden eyes. "What truth?" "The truth about why your mother ran away from the Pact 30 years ago, taking you with her. The truth about the brother she left behind to protect you from a destiny she thought was too dangerous to embrace." The walk to the clearing felt like a journey through a minefield. Helena's hands shook as she smoothed her hair, absurdly concerned about her appearance when meeting a brother she had never known existed. Sarah stayed close beside her, offering silent support while her own emotions churned with confusion and anticipation. Marcus Kane stood beside the SUV with 3 other pack members, but Helena had eyes only for him. Up close, the family resemblance was undeniable. He had their mother's stubborn jaw and their grandmother's expressive hands. When he smiled, Helena saw echoes of her own face reflected in his features. "Helena Rose Crawford," he said, her full name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "You look exactly like Mother did at your age." "Our mother," Helena corrected, her voice stronger than she felt. "Our mother, who never mentioned having a son." Marcus's expression grew pained. Margaret was protecting you the only way she knew how. When you were 3 years old, she witnessed something that convinced her the Pact life was too dangerous for you. So she ran, taking you to the human world where she thought you would be safe from what we are. What did she witness? Sarah asked, her young voice carrying an authority that made all the adults present take notice. Marcus studied his grandniece with interest and approval. A challenge fight that went wrong. An alpha from the Eastern Territories came to claim breeding rights to our bloodline. When our father refused, the challenger killed him and declared his intention to force bond with Margaret. His voice grew cold with old anger. She fought back, killed the challenger, but the trauma convinced her that our world was nothing but violence and death. Helena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She killed someone? She protected herself and her family, Marcus corrected. But she never got over the fear that more challenges would come, that you would grow up in a world where your bloodline made you a target rather than a treasure. He stepped closer, his eyes filled with decades of regret. She was wrong about many things, but not about the dangers. Our family line carries something rare, something that makes us valuable to the wrong kinds of wolves. Darius moved to Helena's side, his presence offering comfort and protection. What makes their bloodline so special? Alpha genetics in the female line, Marcus explained. Most Pact bloodlines carry leadership traits through the males, but our family produces female alphas, women who can birth and lead their own packs. It's extraordinarily rare, and it makes Helena and Sarah incredibly valuable. Sarah's eyes went wide with understanding. That's why I was so strong during the fight at the cemetery. That's why the rogue called me Marcus's descendant. You're more than my descendant, child. You're my heir. Marcus's voice carried pride and sorrow in equal measure. The pack I've led for 30 years has no direct bloodline to pass leadership to. I've been searching for Helena since Margaret disappeared, hoping to bring our family back together before it was too late. Helena felt a familiar surge of protective fury. Too late for what? I'm dying, sister. The simple statement hit Helena like a physical blow. Cancer, moving fast. I have maybe 6 months left, and without a proper heir, my pack will scatter or be absorbed by stronger groups. Hundreds of wolves will lose their home, their protection, their family. The weight of impossible responsibility crashed down on Helena's shoulders. You want me to take over a pack? I'm human. I can barely handle my own life, let alone lead supernatural creatures I don't understand. You're not as human as you think, Marcus said gently. The dormant genes are strong in you. With the right catalyst, you could awaken them. You could become what you were always meant to be. Darius stepped forward, his posture aggressive. What kind of catalyst? Marcus's eyes flicked between Helena and Darius with knowing calculation. A mating bond with a strong alpha. The biochemical changes that occur during the bonding process can trigger dormant transformations in bloodlines like ours. Helena's face burned with embarrassment and fury. So, this is all some elaborate matchmaking scheme. You and Darius planned this? No, Darius said firmly, his own anger evident. I had no idea Marcus existed until he showed up today. My interest in you has nothing to do with pack politics or bloodline manipulation. But it's convenient, isn't it? Helena's voice rose with hysteria. The perfect solution to everyone's problems. I bond with Darius, undergo some mystical transformation, and suddenly I'm qualified to lead a pack I've never met. Helena, Marcus began, but she cut him off with a gesture. No, this is exactly what my mother was trying to protect me from. People who see me as a solution to their problems instead of a person with her own wants and needs. She looked around the circle of supernatural creatures, feeling utterly alone, despite being surrounded by family. I won't be used. She turned to leave, but Sarah's voice stopped her cold. Mom, what if they're right? Helena spun to face her daughter, seeing something in Sarah's eyes that made her heart race with fear. What do you mean? What if this is why everything happened the way it did? My sickness bringing us together, Darius finding us, the attack at the cemetery. Sarah's voice carried a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. What if this was always supposed to happen? Sarah, you can't seriously believe in destiny and fate, and I believe in what I can feel. Sarah interrupted, moving closer to her mother. And I can feel something shifting, something big and important and right. The Pact needs leadership, Uncle Marcus needs family, and we need protection. She paused, then continued in a whisper. And you need to stop running from what you are. Helena looked around the circle of faces watching her with hope and desperation and need. Marcus, dying and alone, searching for someone to carry on his legacy. Darius, strong and protective, offering love and partnership if she was brave enough to accept it. Sarah, magnificent and powerful, ready to embrace a destiny that terrified and thrilled her. And then she felt it, the subtle shift in the wind that her grandmother had taught her to recognize. The moment when the universe held its breath, waiting for a decision that would change everything. If I do this, Helena said slowly, her voice carrying the weight of momentous choice. If I agree to try this transformation, this bonding, this leadership, what happens if I fail? Then you die, Marcus said with brutal honesty. The transformation process is dangerous for dormant bloodlines. Your body might not be able to handle the change. And if I succeed, then you become something more than human, more than wolf. You become a bridge between worlds, a leader who understands both the civilized and the wild. Marcus's eyes burned with hope. You become what our family was always meant to be. Helena closed her eyes and reached deep into herself, searching for the intuition that had guided her through 17 years of single motherhood. What she found there surprised her. Not fear, not resistance, but a bone-deep recognition of rightness. This path, terrifying as it was, felt like coming home to a place she had never known she was looking for. How do we begin? The ritual took place 3 days later, during the new moon, when the veil between worlds was thinnest. Helena had spent those days learning about Pact customs, meeting Marcus's wolves, and trying to come to terms with the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. The Pact gathered in a sacred grove, deep in the mountains, a place where ancient trees formed a natural cathedral and the air hummed with old magic. Helena wore a simple white dress that Marcus said had belonged to their great-grandmother, the last female alpha of their bloodline. Darius stood beside her, magnificent in his authority and power, but Helena could see the fear in his eyes. If the bonding process went wrong, he could lose her forever. The risk was as much his as hers. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the weight of ceremony and tradition. Helena looked around the circle of wolves, watching her with hope and reverence. These could be her people, her responsibility, her family. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a fierce protectiveness she recognized from her years as a mother. "I'm ready." The bonding ritual was unlike anything Helena could have imagined. It began with words, ancient vows spoken in a language that predated human civilization. Then came the marking, Darius's teeth at her throat, not biting but claiming, his scent mingling with hers in a way that marked her as his before the entire pack. When the transformation began, Helena understood why so many dormant bloodlines didn't survive the process. It felt like being torn apart and rebuilt from the inside out, every cell in her body screaming as human DNA gave way to something older and stronger. She might have died from the pain alone, if not for Darius's presence, his bond with her providing an anchor that kept her consciousness from fracturing. When the agony finally ended, Helena opened her eyes to find herself changed in ways both subtle and profound. Her senses were sharper, her strength greater, her connection to the natural world deeper than anything she had experienced as a purely human woman. But most importantly, she could feel the pack bonds settling into place around her like a warm embrace, dozens of connections that spoke of loyalty and protection and belonging. "Welcome home, Alpha," Marcus said, and Helena heard the words not just with her ears, but with every fiber of her transformed being. 6 months later, Helena stood on the porch of what had once been Marcus's cabin and was now hers, watching Sarah lead a group of young pack members through advanced combat training. Her daughter had grown into her role as heir apparent with natural grace, displaying leadership skills that made Helena proud and grateful for the path they had chosen. Marcus had passed peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks ago, his last conscious act being to witness Helena's first successful pack hunt. The transition of leadership had been seamless, accepted by wolves who had come to respect her judgment and admire her fierce protection of those under her care. The human world felt like a distant dream now, though Helena maintained connections to it for practical reasons. She had sold her house in town, using the money to improve pack territory and ensure the education of their young. Sarah would finish high school through online programs, then attend college if she chose, though her destiny as a future alpha seemed more certain with each passing day. "Regrets?" Darius asked, emerging from the cabin to wrap his arms around her from behind. Helena leaned back into his warmth, marveling at how completely her life had changed. "None," she said, and was surprised to realize she meant it completely. "This feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Even the dangerous parts?" Helena smiled, thinking of the challenges they had faced and would continue to face as leaders of a supernatural community living in an increasingly connected world, especially the dangerous parts. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah bounded up the porch steps, her eyes bright with excitement and something that looked like important news. "Mom, Darius, we need to talk," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone comfortable with command. "I've been having dreams again. Not the transformation dreams this time. Something different. Something about others like us, other hidden packs, other bloodlines awakening." Helena felt the familiar thrill of anticipation that came with new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to protect and serve her growing family. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a pack, as a family, as something stronger than any of them could be alone. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, full of mysteries and magic, and the promise of adventures yet to come. Helena Crawford had spent 35 years running from her destiny. Now finally, she was ready to embrace it completely. And in the distance, carried on a wind that tasted of pine and snow and wild places, came the sound of other wolves calling, other packs answering, other families finding their way home to a world where love and loyalty and the fierce protection of family made all the dangers worthwhile. The story was just beginning.